Hi there, I'm Daniel. I'm a sleep physician, and if you want to sleep amazingly well, this channel is for you. Welcome to Ask Daniel number 34, in which we have, I believe, 6 emails and one question that came in via Instagram to talk about. Before we do that, as always, nothing here is medical advice to anyone, just general thoughts and comments that I hope will help anyone that's tuning in here. And with that said, question from Alex here. I really actually wanted to answer this one real quick because it's a kind of quick question, a very important one too, though. But anyway, here it is. Alex asked me this on Tuesday. This came in via Instagram. Just started restricting my time in bed. Even though I slept like 4.5 hours tonight, I feel it was much better quality sleep. Do you think I should keep going and that this is my solution? I used to go to sleep at my normal bedtime even though I didn't feel sleepy. I was just tired. I really hope this method will work. So, Alex, I think the answer is, of course, absolutely. What you're experiencing is very, very encouraging, and we're going to talk more about why spending less time in bed is so important in this episode because we have a specific question about that. But really, here's the thing. Let's use this pizza analogy that I haven't used much at all, maybe just once before. Somebody, who was that? Somebody who I interacted with told me about this analogy. But anyway, imagine that you're making pizza and you have this dough, right? You only have so much dough and you have two choices. You could go for the thin crust, kind of big pizza, or you can go for, the deep dish pizza, right? Now, if you try to spread that dough around as much as you can, guess what? There's going to be holes in it. It's not going to be thick and nice. It's going to be very, very thin and poor quality. If you go for the deep dish, you're going to have like maybe less, it's going to be like the diameter is going to be less, but it's going to be like nice, solid dough. And it's just like that with sleep too. You want that. You want deep dish pizza. You don't want thin crust when it comes to sleep. You want deep dish. You want that nice quality, solid, refreshing, rejuvenating, consolidated sleep. And that is one of the reasons it's good to spend less time in bed. So I think definitely for anyone that's doing better, that is fantastic. And just to comment on, it's a big insight from Alex too, that I used to go to bed when I felt tired, but I wasn't really sleepy. We have seen that many times, that we confuse the feeling. Like sometimes we're just like exhausted and we're like, I haven't slept good in a while. I'm really, really tired. And you go to bed and then you just kind of lay there, and that actually does not make you less tired because you're kind of tossing and turning. You're like, why am I not sleeping? You did not listen to you listened to your body, but you kind of misinterpreted your body. Your body was actually not telling you to go to sleep. It was telling you to either rest or actually be more active. Often when we feel fatigued, that means we actually need to be more active. But anyway, big insight. For everyone out there, don't go to bed unless you are sleepy, unless you're going to bed to rest. But in terms of like for sleep purposes, comment on that one. A lot of people out there may say, well, I never feel that way. I just never feel sleepy. That's because you are hyper aroused. Your emotional state is up there. And guess what? When you start spending less time in bed, you start, doing all the things I always talk about here, that hyperarousal will start decreasing and you will start feeling sleepy again. So Alex, well done. I'm super encouraged. And just, I feel you're going to do really well. Stay the course, set it and forget it. Keep going. You'll do really, really well. Okay, cool. So with that said, we are going to move on to our emails. And I think for the first time, we have a question from Denmark. We've had questions from Iceland, Finland, and Sweden as well. But anyway, here we go. Hi. My name is Harris. I live in Denmark. I recently found your YouTube channel. I want to congratulate you on your YouTube journey, as well as your support for people, including me, suffering from insomnia. I want to thank you so much. It is definitely a journey, and I feel like it's really just started. But anyway, I've never in my life suffered from any kind of sleep disorders. I could have a really stressful day, still manage to sleep like a baby. Never in my life cared about my sleep, and I didn't have a good sleep hygiene. Have been drinking coffee before bedtime, been hitting the gym an hour prior to bedtime, and I still could manage to fall asleep and sleep through the night. My problems with sleep arose 2 years ago in the middle of my exam period. I just couldn't fall asleep at all that one night. My heart was pounding. I felt hyperarousal. I didn't really care too much about that one night, other than I felt tired the whole day. But the problem with falling asleep persisted. I became fully aware of my problem. I went to my doctor and he prescribed me Ambien. He didn't really care about my whole sleep story and didn't suggest me to find a psychologist. The sleeping pills helped me to fall asleep, although I felt incapable to do my normal working activities because I felt groggy and I was scared to be dependent on them. I thought my insomnia was due to my exams, but after the exam period, they persisted for 2 whole weeks and stopped out of nowhere. I don't really know how my insomnia stopped back then, other than I felt like sleepy for the first time in a long time and not tired but wired. I thought back then that my insomnia would go away on its own and never happen again, but I was wrong. I felt like I developed a trauma in my brain after the first episode of insomnia. Every time the clock hits 10 p.m., my thoughts begin to tell me, soon it will be time to sleep. You need to do something boring so you can fall asleep faster. Even though I hadn't had sleep problems, I started overthinking when I lay down in my bed, which I never had before, and it took me something like an hour before I fell asleep. I remember that I was traveling to Paris with my girlfriend last year. The plane got delayed for 2 hours, and the time it landed, it was 11 p.m. My thoughts on sleep suddenly appeared. They were something like, you've passed your winding down before sleep routine. How will you ever fall asleep tonight? At that time, I gave up a lot of my pleasurable activities, reading a book, watching some series, and seeing my friends before my sleep routine because I was afraid that I would not fall asleep. I've been spending around hundreds of dollars each month on natural supplements that I took prior to bedtime because I thought that without them I couldn't fall asleep. I got severe insomnia for 2 months ago when I had a hard time in my life. I got hit by stress, depression. I left sick from work, and my manager said that I could get back to work when I felt better. I managed to resolve my depression with the help of hypnotherapy, which helped me immensely, but my insomnia persisted. I felt hyperarousal every single night. I needed to take Ambien to get me to sleep because otherwise I could be awake for 3 days in a row. I started spending the whole day on research about sleep and finding the best available treatment. That made things even worse in terms of sleep and my daily activities. Now I started to get angry and frustrated about my lack of sleep. I know deep down in myself that I don't want to depend on sleeping pills, and therefore I managed to seek out for a sleep psychologist who practices CBT. I have some questions for you that I really hope you can help me or other person suffering with. Will my performance targeted thoughts after my trauma before bedtime ever go away? I don't want to live a life where every single night I'm scared of not being able to fall asleep. Will I always be vulnerable, have insomnia every time I need to do something exciting the next day? And how is it possible for me to be less vulnerable? Thank you for your time. I'm so glad I finally found someone I can share this with because here no one takes me seriously. I'll keep you updated on my journey. Harris, thanks so much for reaching out. And there's so much we could talk about, but I think we were going to get to your questions, of course, but actually before that, I want to say this. Your story is, very, very common one. You have all these classic elements of I slept well, I didn't really care much about my sleep, and then there's this like precipitating thing, an exam triggers some sleepless nights, they kind of resolve, but then, hey, guess what? What's happened now is that that part of your brain that's there to keep you safe, the amygdala, has actually identified sleeplessness as a threat. It's been like, whoa, you went without sleep for a while. Let's keep an eye out for that. Make sure that thing doesn't come back and threatens you. So even though you don't feel that way, your threat monitoring system, your safety system there is actually on the lookout for more sleeplessness. And then it happens again. And then, and basically, yeah, I maybe I get the timeline wrong here, but then, you have the Paris episode and all that thing where it just triggers it. And, I often say, like, having had insomnia is kind of like PTSD for a lot of people, like often people have the initial bout of insomnia, which is like the big one, which everybody is fearful that it will come back again. It's just like PTSD, absolutely. But what I feel very encouraging here is that there is a lot of insight. There's a lot of insight here, and basically, if you look at this whole story, Harris, it's kind of like before this started happening, you didn't care about sleep hygiene. You just went to bed when you felt like sleeping. You had coffee before bedtime. You hit the gym, and that tells you right there and then that's where you should be at. That's where you want to go. That's your goal, to be like that again, to not worry about sleep. And how do you get back there? Well, you're going to have a CBT therapist to work with. But I might some like couple things that I think are super important is know that sleep is simple, that it's not complicated, that it's really just gas and brake. The gas is like your body's need to sleep. The more of that sleep appetite you have, the longer you've been awake, the more likely you're to sleep. And then you have that hyper arousal, the anxiety, the excitement, the stress, all that stuff. There's nothing more than that really plays a role. It's just gas and brake, and the gas you get going by getting up early, spending maybe like 7 hours in bed, not more. And then the break is a little trickier, but oftentimes when you start spending less time in bed, that kind of overrides the break, the hyperarousal. So you start sleeping better, and then that in itself makes that break come off again. Another important thing I think is like just knowing that this gas and brake thing is the only thing that really matters. Then the kind of like I should put it, the insight that comes after that one is that light doesn't matter, sound doesn't matter, your bedding doesn't matter, supplements, none of that matters. And the more you can think of like none of that really matters, sleep is simple, it's not complicated, I don't have to do anything to make myself sleep, that also backs off the brake a lot. And when it comes to medications, you may already have heard me say this, but they cannot make you sleep. They just kind of I think mostly they're placebo. Initially, when you start taking medications, it's like, a chemical thing that kind of sedate you and you feel like, oh, this is going to make me sleep. You start believing in it. That helps you, but they cannot make you sleep, which means that if somebody's really dependent on them, they stop taking it and then they can't sleep at all. That is, in my opinion, simply a psychological dependence. It's like you know that you're not taking it, and that makes you hyper aroused. You're like, I'm not taking it, what's going to happen, etc. That's what causes rebound and insomnia. And I think super important there is like if someone's taking medication for a while or here and there or whatever, whenever you took a medication and then slept, it was your own body that made you sleep. It was always your own body. Every minute, every second, every hour of sleep was produced by your own body. And that's super important for you to maintain or rebuild sleep confidence, believe in yourself. So I hope that helped. It was kind of like some big picture things there. Now, the questions. Will my performance targeting thoughts after my trauma before bedtime ever go away? This is a common question. A lot of people are like, can I ever sleep like a normal person? Can this ever go away again? And I think what's important there is this, that insomnia is not, kind of this entity that has a life of its own that you cannot control and just kind of hits you and then it goes away and then comes back and you have it's not. Insomnia really is simply that your brain has identified sleeplessness as a threat, and you can train your brain. It's kind of like a scared child, if you will. You can just like soothe it. It's like, no, you have nothing to be afraid of. There's no monster in the closet, nothing. And honestly, in my opinion, Harris, if you do the things I talk about here, work with your therapist, etc., it's just like any other thing in life that we want to pursue. If you just keep going and you don't give up and you continue working, you're guaranteed to have success. Meaning you're guaranteed to kind of retrain your brain, and you're guaranteed to like let go of the worries and sleep well. To a lot of people, that seems like, how could that be the case? But I certainly believe that it's just like weight loss too. Like if you just like eat less, exercise more, you are going to lose weight, guaranteed, And what you're looking for is just the magic moment. It's kind of like, let's say you start spending less time in bed, you start not taking any supplements, and you're not doing anything, so you're enjoying your life, you look forward to bedtime, you watch that Netflix show, you have fun, etc. There will be that moment where you're like, oh, I slept good for 2 nights in a row, this is working, I believe in myself again, and then you're home free, So the answer really that is, in my opinion, is you have total control. If you just do the work, you will get there, guaranteed. Will I be less vulnerable? every time I need to do something exciting the next day, will I have insomnia, etc., etc. I think you've had trouble sleeping for like 2 years, which means that it will take a while, I am sure, before you have completely, before your brain is completely retrained, if you will. You may, even a couple of years down the line, you may still be a little bit more easily triggered than somebody who has never had insomnia. True, but that doesn't need to be a problem. And by the way, that insight itself is so helpful. Let's say, your girlfriend or somebody else has an exam the next day and they sleep a little bit worse, and you sleep kind of a lot worse that time. Well, then you can just be like, that's normal for me. I had insomnia in the past, so for me, I'm kind of a little bit easier triggered. And then you can accept that, and the more you demystify, don't think of anything as anything big like that, it will go away with time. It'll go away with time. Absolutely. And being less vulnerable really is just about building sleep confidence. And by the way, the way you do that, now we're just going to touch on that anticipatory insomnia for a while, is that let's say you're overall sleeping well, but having had insomnia, you're now having this like, whenever I have something big going on tomorrow, I tend to really sleep little. That's like anticipatory insomnia. The key things there is like, you can't do anything to prevent it. So don't try to like, oh, tomorrow I have a big thing, therefore I really need to sleep tonight. That really works against you. 2, find evidence that you can do well on little sleep. Even if that kind of is a once in a blue moon occurrence, that doesn't matter. Like if you can prove to yourself that even on little sleep you can do fine, that's a huge step towards not having anticipatory insomnia. So I think those are the big ones. Harris, stay in touch. Let us know how things go, and thanks for sending this question. Very well. So with that said, we'll move on to our next question, and this is from Leah, who has a fall question. This came in 2 days ago, and actually the email starts with Leah saying, sharing that she's found that when research studies and stuff like that talk about sporadic fatal insomnia and familial fatal insomnia, they kind of got it. They're completely mixed up. They call sleep deprivation insomnia, or like abnormal sleep behaviors insomnia, et cetera, when her insight is that insomnia has actually nothing to do with these conditions that sadly have been called fatal familial insomnia and sporadic fatal insomnia, which I'm going to read this in a separate episode that we're going to put in that fatal insomnia playlist. But she had so the specific question is, Leah has sent me a kind of a strip from an EEG from a sleep study, and she's asking, like, there's like two, like this alternating patterns that are called A and B, and she's asking like, why is this not classified as sleep? And I want to say, I believe the reason here, Leah, is that by convention, when you look at a sleep study, you look at 30-second epics, they're called, right? 30 second, 30 second, 30 second, 30 second. And if 50% or more of that epic is sleep, the whole thing is called sleep. If 50% or more is not sleep, then the whole thing is called not sleep. So it's probably just that the A in this section, which is not sleep, is, depending on how you cut it up, but it's probably in a way that A is like more than 50%, and then the whole thing is just classified as not sleep. I think that's that. I'm not 100% sure, but I think that's why. So I hope that helped, Leah, and we're going to talk. And again, I'm going to use the other things in a separate video. So Leah, stay in touch. And with that said, here we are. So we have a follow-up question from Rebecca, and she asked the following. This came in 2 days ago. Does your body stop recognizing sleep cues, get used to not sleeping, and never fully get to the point where you feel sleepy? I don't get that yawning, can't keep my eyes open, I'm so sleepy feeling ever. It just keeps going, and I have to close my eyes, and eventually I'll go into a light sleep that is refreshing and feels like I've been awake the whole time. I don't understand it. Other people seem to get sleepy at some point. Yeah, this is extremely common, Rebecca. Extremely common. Um, there is in the success stories playlist, there are at least one episode, maybe even more than one episode, about someone named Ellen, and she had this. She estimated sleeping like really nothing at all, or like very very little, always very superficial sleep. But then she was like, but it's weird because I'm never really tired during the day. I seem to have a lot of energy. It was like very bizarre to her. And after a while, what she realized was that she was actually very hyper aroused. She didn't feel hyper aroused, she didn't feel anxious at all. But after starting to do some work, she worked with Martin Reed, she worked with Martin Reed. um, she started noticing that she was hyperaroused. And when that hyperarousal came down, she slept more, and she didn't have that kind of bizarre feeling of like, I don't ever get sleepy. I'm always wide awake. What's going on? So basically, like, does your body stop recognizing sleep cues? I want to say in a way, but the important thing here is that there's nothing wrong with your. It's not like your brain can get damaged and your sleep system is broken and it can't be repaired or anything like that. It's very simple. It's just like when you are hyper aroused, when your emotional kind of state is heightened, then you never feel sleepy. You never feel sleepy because you have that kind of built-in like alertness that keeps you from feeling sleepy. You don't have any sleep cues, etc. And you always have light sleep. Yeah, this is classic hyper arousal. And again, once you start, spending less time in bed, stop researching, learning about insomnia, all the things I always talk about here, eventually that hyper arousal starts coming down, and you have those moments where you're like, oh, I nodded off. I feel sleepy again. It's almost like a lot of people describe it as like, whoa, I haven't felt sleepy in like ages, and now I feel sleepy again. I'm like, my body's learning again. So, yeah, this is very common. And with reduced hyperarousal, you start noticing sleepiness again. Absolutely. Rebecca, hang in there and stay in touch. All right. So now we'll move to a question from Navinder that came in a day ago. Hello, Daniel. I have been suffering from insomnia for about a year. One of the main symptoms is that I tend to panic about not being able to fall asleep. Funnily enough, this behavior seems to be almost entirely out of my control as my body releases tons and tons of adrenaline despite being calm mentally, for example, on summer holidays from university with no stress or exams. Anyways, I have been prescribed mirtazapine and have been on this drug for approximately 3 months. It has worked wonders and has calmed my body down to the point of enabling sleep. From my understanding, sleep restriction and stimulus control therapy usually helps because it stops us from seeing sleep to be a source of stress. Since mirtazapine also has stopped me from seeing sleep to be a source of stress through its anti-anxiety effects, if I stop taking it, will I be totally fine regards to falling asleep? That is, no longer having insomnia because the medication helped me to stop viewing sleep as stressful? Or do I still need to practice sleep restriction after coming off the medication? I hope this question makes sense. Yeah, it absolutely, totally understand the question, and to be able to answer it in the best possible way, let's go over this email a little bit and actually start using this model, which is, it's just, there's going to be 5 things here, and right now there's just 2, but this is kind of this is very important. This is very important, and we talked about this earlier this week, that emotions are really the results of thoughts. Oftentimes, we have what's called automatic thoughts. They kind of just there doesn't seem to be a particular circumstance that produces the thought, but it's just there, and it can seem like an emotion. It can seem like an emotion comes out of nowhere, but in reality, there is a thought. There is a thought that there, behind the emotion, and it can be helpful to identify the thoughts so that you can work on it. Just finding the thought can be helpful, or trying to modify the thought, etc., can be really helpful. And the reason I bring it up is that We read here that I tend to panic about not being able to fall asleep. Finally, this behavior seems entirely out of my control. It's, this happens under summer holidays where there's no stress or exams. And I want to say that if you have if you it's bedtime, you're starting to almost like panic about not being able to fall asleep. My belief is that that panic cannot come out of nowhere. There must be a trigger for it. It must come from somewhere. I think it sounds like kind of a fight or flight type response, and the thought, there must be some thought there. You have been suffering from insomnia about a year. I mean, the classic thing would be I'm about to go to bed. Will I sleep tonight? How much will I sleep? How long am I going to have insomnia? Those type of questions. Are they there? Can you identify them? In that case, you can just write them down. That in itself helps. If you identify a question, like if you identify a thought being like, I have this thought, like I won't be able to sleep, or I can't sleep, or my sleep system is broken, then you can write that thought down, and you can be like, I'm going to change that thought. I'm going to pick a more neutral thought, like I've had trouble sleeping, like my sleep system is broken, becomes I've had trouble sleeping, but I can get better, whatever. Like when you change that thought, things can really get better. So just some thoughts on that one. Now, I've been prescribed Mirtazapine and have been on this drug for approximately 3 months. Now, it has worked wonders! ! And has calmed my body down to the point of enabling sleep. I think anyone on this channel, like when it comes to medications, talk to your doctor, do what they tell you to do, etc. Now, if you think about how should I put this? Let's put it this way. You probably heard people say that, choose a thought that serves you well, pick a thought that is helpful to you. And when it comes to sleep, if someone believes that I couldn't sleep at all, but this medication has been a wonder for me, it has really produced a lot of sleep for me, and I that may not be helpful, because then you have kind of externalized confidence. You feel like I can't sleep on my own, but this medication has really been super helpful. It has allowed me to sleep. And I'm happy to hear that somebody's sleeping well, but I'm also concerned when somebody attributes their sleep, their improved sleep, to something that is external, because I feel that then that has started to erode their sleep confidence. Now they feel like I can't sleep on my own. I need this thing to sleep. So as I often talk about, like medications cannot produce sleep. You say it has calmed my body down to the point of enabling sleep. That is more true in my mind. Medications can kind of sedate you and then take away some of the hyperarousal and then allow your body to sleep. But in reality, I again believe that the pure chemicals in your brain aren't doing that much. It's more like when you take a medication, you're like, oh, I think this is going to be really helpful. And the belief that really makes a difference. And, one kind of indirect proof of that is that oftentimes people take medications to sleep and they feel like, oh, this is great for a month, even a year or something like that. But then there's this stressful event and they're like, it stopped working. I used to take it, it stopped working. In reality, it hasn't worked. You just believed in it and it's been a placebo all along, but suddenly there's a new stress. And then it seems like it stopped working all of the blue, but it hasn't really done anything. It's just that you have not been worried. And that's again, that person who has now taken a medication for a year and now stopped working, they are in a they're more vulnerable, because now they're going to be again looking at the outside. Can I up the medication? Can I take another medication? And then your sleep confidence is continues to erode. So I think for someone that's taking medication and are sleeping well, I believe that it's great to start moving sleep confidence to the inside and being like, yes, I've taken this medication, I've slept well, but guess what? Medications cannot produce sleep. It's always been my own body that produced the sleep. Even if I took medication, I produce the sleep. My body produces sleep. I don't have no problems with sleep. Then you start building that sleep confidence. that is so important to get to a point where you never ever worry about sleep. Now, that said, from my understanding, sleep restriction and stimulus control therapy usually helps because it stops us from seeing sleep to be the source of stress. You know, again, we're going to go over sleep restriction in detail because we have a specific question about that. But I want to say that anything that is done, if it's education, just kind of understanding why you have insomnia, sleep physiology, and the techniques like spending less time in bed and like leaving the bed if you're frustrated in bed, they are all maybe not so much like stop seeing sleep as a source of stress. Yeah, I think that's true actually. In a way, it's true, but I guess broadly speaking, they're all there to train your brain to become comfortable with the idea of sleeplessness. You know, when you hear that, you're like, what? How can I be that? But that is really where you want to be. They're all there to train your brain that the loss of sleep, it's not dangerous. You know, you can do fine without sleep. Sleep is not that important. When you get to that point where you're comfortable with the idea of like not sleeping that much, you're going to sleep really good. So I think all of it is really there to train your brain that sleep is the loss of sleep is not something to be resisted or avoided, and then you sleep really well. Now, the question here really was like, okay, I'm taking this medication and I'm sleeping great. Will that mean that I can just come off of it? Or will I still kind of like, after I come off of it, do this, like spend less time in bed to work my insomnia? This actually goes back to what I talked about before. I think for someone that has this belief that the medication has made me sleep, which I don't, you may not have that. You may think that it just kind of calmed me down so I could sleep. If somebody has this belief that this medication has not really made me sleep, I think they're in a good position to not need to do anything further. They can just stop taking medication because they have sleep confidence and they'll do well. On the other hand, if somebody is like not so sure about that and think that this medication has really helped me produce sleep, then they may have some rebound insomnia. When they come off, they may have more trouble sleeping. And in that case, I think maybe it's good to spend less time in bed for sure. So we can't predict what's going to happen, but last thing I want to say here, which I think is really important, is when someone stops taking medication and then ends up having like a series of sleepless nights, that, in my opinion, in my belief system, is not because there's a chemical that was there before that's no longer in your brain. No, it is because your brain is going like, I'm not taking this medication. What's going to happen? Am I going to sleep 1 hour? Can I not sleep at all? What if I go back on it? Should I take half of it? What's going to happen tomorrow? What's happening? Those thoughts are what produces rebound insomnia. And if as long as you don't decide, like if you then decide, oh, I'm going to go back to this medication, then you've kind of proven, then you've kind of trained your brain that sleeplessness is a problem. It should be avoided. You have to take this medication. On the other hand, if you have that kind of rebound insomnia and just kind of don't go back on the medication, then you've done the opposite. Then you've trained your brain that, you know what, sleeping a little is not a problem. You know, your brain is becoming more comfortable with the thought of not sleeping that much, and you sleep much better. So I think that is the thing here. Yeah, Navinder, thanks so much for this question. Stay in touch. Any more questions, please send me an email or comment, and we shall go from there. Oh, Malena's live here. And she's saying, if you have a sleep schedule, will you sleep deeper? I feel like I've been sleeping longer ever since I found your videos. That's amazing. But I'm still tired during the day. I'm thinking I'm just getting light sleep and not the deep sleep. Okay, good question. And who had this question? Oh, yeah. If you listen to the podcast episode from today where I talked to Logan, exactly the same thing here. Logan said that he'd been sleeping longer for the last few days, but actually felt, if anything, more tired. And I want to say this, that is very common. That's very common. And the reason is this, hyperarousal, when you're kind of like in this like hyper alert, hyper aware state, right? Which, by the way, can be like very obvious. You feel like I am anxious, or it could be like just a little bit, like you're kind of a little bit preoccupied. But that hyper arousal actually masks fatigue. So check this out. Imagine that you're like kind of running. You're playing a basketball game. It's getting really intense. You're playing. You're having fun. Blah 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 blah. You don't feel tired because you're super active. Blood is pumping. Adrenaline is flowing. Blah 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 blah. And then you stop playing, and then you're like, "Whoa, I'm really tired." And that's what happens. When you have like pretty active insomnia, you are in this hyper aroused state, and that hyper aroused state actually masks how fatigued you are. But then when you start like learning about insomnia, you realize, okay, there's no mystery there. It's just, like this maladaptive behaviors, and you start spending less time in bed, and your hyperarousal comes down. Two things happen. You start sleeping longer, but you also start feeling how tired you are. That fatigue has been unmasked. So that is very common. And then the temptation can then be like, I'm sleeping longer, but my sleep quality isn't good because I feel so tired. And then people go like, I got to do something about that. I'm going to try to supplement or this thing. I think the best thing to do is not do that. Just wait. When you're sleeping longer and you're more tired, it's just a matter of time until, you're going to kind of recover from that, all the stuff that's been going on, and you're going to sleep well and feel good again. So that is the answer to that one, I believe, Malena. So Thanks for answering these for this live question. I really appreciate that. And now we have a question from Hayley, and then from Paul, right? Yeah, exactly. That's it. Okay. And it goes like this. Hi, Daniel. I've been struggling with severe insomnia for about 3 years now. It became very severe after I was abusing Xanax, Ambien, Seroquel to sleep. I remained on the Seroquel for the last 2 years, and I finally worked my way down to 50 milligrams, which is the last milligram to completely getting off. I was originally on 200 milligrams, and I've tapered down to 50 in 2 months. However, I struggle with the fact that I can never accidentally fall asleep or nap. My sleep is very controlled, and I will never, ever sleep without my medicine. It doesn't matter if I only slept 2 hours in a night, I will go through the whole day, not even giving myself a chance to rest because I'm so traumatized after all the times I've tried taking a nap and I've been unsuccessful. My brain won't allow me to sleep when the sun is out or if I'm in other people's company, sleepover, etc. I do believe I can sleep. I just can't seem to get past the obsessing, which it has been a complete obsession over not being able to sleep. I've completely stopped my life for almost 3 years now, revolving my life around sleep. Even if I drink heavily at night, I will take my medicine. Your channel has helped me taper off the medicine without even applying the CBTI methods. I just go to sleep at the same time every night. I struggle with the idea of shortening my time in bed, of course, because I'm afraid it will scare me into not sleeping at all. Anytime I do anything that reminds me of a time when I slept fine, I completely psych myself out of resting. For example, when I'm on a plane, I obsess the whole time and think to myself, wow, before I had this issue, I would have slept the whole plane ride. And same goes whenever I'm laying down or in a resting position. If I do happen to doze off during the day, I experience hypnic jerks and will have to get up and go about the rest of my day frustrated and terrified of what my life has become. I've made major progress with not relying on large doses of medication, but I'm still allowing insomnia to control every aspect of my life. I feel like I need some guidance on how to stop obsessing. I see. All right. So firstly, Hayley, I want to say, well done. You come down on your medications. That's amazing. And other than that, you are completely 100% aware of what the problem is. And just, for anybody else out there, sleep is, if it is one thing that is more true than anything else when it comes to sleep, is the more you try, the less you get. If someone is starting to get a little bit preoccupied with their sleep and they're kind of like, I'm going to see if I can try to sleep more by going to bed a little earlier, that person will sleep a little bit less, right? uh, but the person who's like just desperate, just like, I have to get sleep, I gotta get it, I'm desperate, I'm panicking here, they are going to be so hyper aroused that they're almost going to get no sleep at all, right? So the it's, and we hear here from Hayley that it's just kind of complete obsession, and we heard other people on the channel say like, I don't sleep at all during the night, and then my entire day I just obsess about sleep, and then I can't sleep. And of course, it's like, if you're obsessing about sleep all day long, then you're not going to sleep because your body's just like so tense, right? So how can you get to that point where you stop obsessing? Well, this is really a question of, again, starting to become more comfortable with the idea of not sleeping, and the reason is that if you are like, if you're not willing to lose a minute of sleep, then it's super hard to get to a point where you sleep better, On the flip side, in the extreme case, if somebody's completely comfortable with not sleeping for a week, they will have no trouble sleeping. So it is all about like becoming more comfortable with like losing sleep, if you will. And it's when reading this again, I feel like there's a lot of strong, there's a strong component of like anxiety, obsession, like etc. And I'm assuming you have somebody that helps you manage maybe anxiety here, so that's of course important. I think my channel here is kind of a do-it-yourself channel for insomnia, which has its limitations, so getting some good support in terms of the anxiety is going to be important. Oh, by the way, maybe working with somebody like Martin Reed, insomniacoach.com, or Stephanie, who was guesting the Stephanie Romashevsky, who was guesting it, somebody like that may be helpful to you as well. But how do you stop obsessing? So one thing that I think is really helpful for pretty much everyone with trouble sleeping is spending less time in bed. Now, here's the thing. You often think that bedtime restriction, or it's also called sleep restriction, is like this like really severe, strict thing, that you have to spend a very little amount of time in bed, which can be super anxiety provoking. I don't think it has to be that at all. I literally think if somebody said, let's say, I don't know what's going on here, Hayley, we haven't talked about that, but I hear from what I'm hearing there, I can't nap. I can never accidentally fall asleep or nap. And when I try, I always am unsuccessful. When I hear that, my thought goes, this is a person who tries to nap here and there, who's pursuing sleep, trying to sleep whenever they can get it. And which then also makes me believe that even if we haven't talked about that at all, I have this belief now that you probably are spending a good amount of time in bed trying to sleep. And where I'm going with this is to say that consider spending less time in bed, but it doesn't have to be anything extreme, Maybe say, I'm going to spend 7.5 hours in bed, and maybe you can do something like, I'm going to get up at 7 every morning. That's usually the most important thing, like getting out of bed, even if you had a very little sleep, like getting out of bed every morning, getting up, teaching your brain that it doesn't have to pursue sleep all the time. It doesn't have to be, so obsessed about sleep, getting out of bed every morning at the same time. And then going to bed maybe like not before 11, or even like, I'm going to stop checking the time at 10 and then do whatever I feel. Something like that is kind of like a little bit of sleep restriction, a little bit of bedtime restriction, but nothing that is anxiety provoking. I think that could be huge. And now the other thought, that's kind of a behavior change. And what else could be done? Like, I think if you haven't done any form of journaling, I think the most simple form of journaling is just to write, like pick 5 minutes every day and just write down everything you worry about when it comes to sleep. Just getting it on paper itself can really help. And if you want to take it a step further, then writing down, a list of like, what do you think are problem thoughts? Like, I can never sleep, or, I can never even nap, or things like that. And try to pick one of them and say, I'm going to change this thought. I can't sleep. I'm going to change that to like, I can sleep, let's say. And then you pick like a middle one, which is like, I have slept. even if this hasn't been good, I have slept, and just like try to move the needle, try to work yourself from a problem thought to a goal thought. That could really work as well. And what else? This is a hard one to do initially, but anything that has nothing to do with sleep, meeting friend, go whale watching, biking, whatever it is, like that interests you, that you could do for pleasure. I think pursuing anything like that as well it's hard to do at this point, but that could really help as well. Okay, Hayley, hope this helped. Stay in touch. Let us know how you do, and any questions, of course, please send them. Yeah. Okay, and now to the last one, which is from Paul here. Yes, he said this 2 hours ago. Oh, really? No, 20 hours ago. Dear Daniel, I found your YouTube channel while I was doing some research on insomnia. First, I want to say thank you so much. The content you create is very informative and helpful. Thank you for the encouragement and for the question here. I was hoping your opinion on something. For about a year and a half, I've been having issues. Nearly always, it's not falling asleep that's the problem, but rather waking up early. Usually around 4 to, why is that? Why don't I see that? 4 to 4:30 a.m. This problem definitely arose out of stress, but despite the stress being gone, the pattern of the pattern of waking up early is still there. In addition, sleep is quite fragile, quite up and down in terms of cycling good and bad nights. Definitely made progress recently in that the profound frustration I used to feel is much less than it was. I've also come to realize that all these little sleep hygiene tips don't really make a difference. I've heard that CBTI, specifically sleep restriction, is the way to go. I've tried both midnight to 6, 11:30 to 5:30 windows, and the road has been bumpy with both. After about 5 days, I had to stop both times as I just couldn't stay up to the beginning of the sleep window. Got it. So tired, I would just fall asleep on the floor. On the floor. Oh my gosh. I think the most sensible thing would be to move the window to around 11 to 5 p.m. Does that sound like the right approach to you? Also, could you please help me understand a little bit how sleep restriction works? On a good night, I typically sleep around 10:30 to 5 or so. So how is restricting my sleep to be a fairly similar window to that going to help me break the pattern of waking up early? Not doubting the process, just like to understand better. Super. This is a great set of questions here. And starting with actually the last thing here, not doubting the process, I just like to understand it better. That is super important. And I, in my ignorance, a year and a half ago or something like that, I really thought you could just tell people to spend less time in bed and then they would magically sleep better. And the reason that doesn't work is when you don't understand why you're spending less time in bed, you're always going to have like this doubt. Am I really doing it right? Should I be doing it? And it's not going to help. It's actually maybe making you more preoccupied. So this is a great question. Like, you have to understand why you're doing it for it to be helpful and work. And actually, with that said, let's go backwards and then go back to your question and just say a couple of quick questions. My problem is not falling asleep, but waking up early. Some people have most people have both. That insomnia, it takes a long time to fall asleep and wake up a lot and wake up early. Some people have one or the other. In reality, I want to say if you have one, you probably have a little less insomnia than somebody who has both. But what I want to say here is that having one or the other, you shouldn't think of it as like unusual or strange. They all come from the same place. They all come from hyperarousal, and it's always good to think of your insomnia as like ordinary. Just put it that way. The more ordinary you think of it, the less problems getting past it. Okay. Now, sleep is quite fragile. Yes, you haven't gotten sleep confidence yet. No, cycling of bad nights and good nights, very, very common. Nothing unusual with that. Good things will come to you. Definitely, I can see you're doing great work already. Now, sleep hygiene really doesn't make a difference. That is huge. That is really good. The more you think of sleep as simple, you don't have to check all the boxes to get everything right. That's super helpful. The profound frustration is less. That makes me really encouraged. You're on the right path. And with that said, I think, yeah, that's it. Let's jump to the answer here. How does sleep restriction work? I love this question. I think it's a really good one. And I want to say there are three really important things to know about sleep restriction, or bedtime restriction that I like to call it. And number one is it does increase your sleep drive, right? If someone is spending, let's say, 8 hours in bed, but they're sleeping very little, and they're tossing and turning, etc., like that, spending less time in bed and getting up early makes them have more of like continuous, sustained like wakefulness. So I said like this because it's like it's more, how should I put it? It's more quality wakefulness instead of like the in and out of sleep. That a lot of people ask me like, well, I don't sleep much at all at night, so how can I have more wakefulness? I really have a lot of wakefulness, but it's not the same thing. If you get up early and you have a stretch of like, let's say 16 hours, 17 hours of uninterrupted wakefulness, that is better than like the tossing and turning. So anyway, answer is sleep restriction does work by increasing your sleep drive. You have a stretch of sustained wakefulness that builds your sleep drive, so you're more sleepy when you get to bed. That is true. But I believe that is not the most important thing. I think it's the least important of the three things that we're going to go over here. The second one I believe is super important. Here's the thing. When you have insomnia, it is always driven by the fear of losing sleep, the concern about losing sleep, and the desire to get more sleep, right? The more you desire to sleep, the more you want to sleep, as we talked about with Hayley, the more you want it, the less you get. So when you spend less time in bed, that is a very important psychological step towards not trying to sleep. When you spend less time in bed, you're telling your brain, sleep isn't that important. I don't have to be worried about it. I can spend less time in bed. It's a psychological step away from trying to sleep. That is hugely important. And thirdly, when you start spending less time in bed in a kind of controlled fashion, like you do it systematically over time, there will be the magic moment. There will be the moment where you're like, whoa, I slept the whole night for a second time in a row. Like, this is really working. There's nothing wrong with me. I'm on the right path, and that's the magic moment when you reverse everything that led you to have trouble sleeping. So those are the reasons. That is how it works. And now I think that you're asking, should I move my sleep window to like 11 p.m. to 5? I think when it comes to that sleep window, I think the most important thing is to pick something that you think is sustainable, that is not going to be too much of a challenge for you. I think a lot of people make the mistake of saying like, I'm going to go with a 5-hour sleep window or 5.5-hour sleep window. I think it's better to do like a 6.5 or even 7-hour window. If you say you typically sleep around 10:30 to 5, well, okay, got it. But how much time do you spend in bed? So if you typically sleep 10:30 to 5 and you literally get up at 5, well, then you can stay there. You can be like, I get up at 5 and I'm not going to go to bed for 10:30 and just keep going with that. But I'm suspecting that you're actually spending more time in bed than the 6.5 hours. So I think a 6.5-hour sleep window works great. Even a 7-hour sleep window could work great, as long as you get out of bed the same time in the morning and avoid falling asleep. And by the way, one more thing: when people have that happens to you, like I just couldn't stay up to the beginning of my sleep window. I think a great thing to do is, like, let's say you pick a sleep window that is 11:30 to 6, right? But you're always falling asleep before 11:30. What you can do is like, okay, I'm going to kind of open up the sleep window on that end, meaning instead of waiting for 11:30, I'm going to stop checking the time at 10:30 and just go by how I feel, but I'm still going to respect the 6 a.m. getting out of bed thing. So that is another thing that could work really well. So Paul, I feel very optimistic reading this. I think you're going to do really well. Stay in touch, and thanks so much for the question. And yeah, with that said, thanks everyone for all the questions. Thanks, Malena, for being live here and asking questions. And I have we have a success story. I was planning to do it today, but it'll be tomorrow. Really good one, really good one. So please check in on that one. So with that said, hope you're doing really well, and I'll see you tomorrow. Until then, bye.